Hey folks, it's Papa. I've been telling you I was going to tell you this story about my dad, and I kind of named it the hammer. The hammer. First, let's kind of give you a little background on my dad. You know, my dad grew up poor. Uh, his dad was poor, and his grandpa was poor. They all lived here on this place. You know, my great grandpa, my grandpa, and my dad, they all right here. They were farmers. And even though my dad was just a boy, he grew up watching grandpa and dad do things poor ways. There's used to be an old saying, poor people have poor ways, and there's a lot of truth to it. It's nothing bad. Listen, now, it's not, if you're poor, you're poor. Basically, you're just poor. And that's not a sin. But they grew up poor. And in saying that, when something would break, they weren't able just to go to town and try to buy a new one. They had to repair the best they could what it broke. Now, at some point, maybe it couldn't be repaired, and then they would have to do all kinds of finagling to get enough money to go and buy what they needed. Money wasn't just everywhere to be got, to be got, and I'm sure that's proper English. My teacher used to tell me, you need help with your English. I probably need help with a lot of things, but anyway, this story goes about my dad. My dad, like I say, grew up poor, and his dad passed away when he was 16. And he still had 5 little brothers and sisters at home with mom. So he left home and went to work on a ranch. And I may have told y'all that story. Not too far from here, and brought every penny he made once a month when he got paid, give it to his mom, and he stayed in the bunkhouse and all that. Worked cattle and broke horses. He was an awesome horseman too. I've never saw a horse he couldn't ride, and not out of just tying it down, so to speak. I've seen him get on horses that never been rode before, and he had a gentle way with them. And anyway, back to my story. He worked on that ranch till he was 21. He went to work for Humble Oil, which later become Exxon, and he stayed there 35 years. And even though he made good, I say good money, you know, he still wasn't wanting to throw money away. He didn't just throw money away. If something still could be fixed, he fixed it. I grew up watching that same thing. I grew up with my dad, watching my dad repair things and try to fix things. And I remember he had an old axe, I think, and a couple of old hammers that had homemade handles in them that I think his dad had even done that, maybe his grandpa. But I've seen my dad break a handle out of an axe and go cut him some wood and come back and carve out a handle. Also on a shovel one time. So, you know, he broke a handle out of something. He wasn't just going to run to town and try to get a replacement. He'd repair it. But that brings me to the story about the hammer. You know, I got an example here. Most hammers, now this has a fiberglass handle. It's not that old. This is called the head. And most of them are like the old common was 16 ounces, like a pound. Okay, 16 ounces. And this is the face of the hammer. This is the claw. The claw was used to pull nails and staples and stuff, or even break boards apart, you know, put them in between 2 boards and pry them apart. This was the face. It's what the part you drove the nail with. And y'all probably all know that. It's 16 ounces. But they all had, back in the day, they all had wooden handles. And it wasn't too hard to break a handle. And my dad would go and cut something, a certain kind of wood, I guess. I don't know if it was oak or ash, what it was, and he'd carve it. Sit there. I remember seeing him sitting around the fire by the heater at night, carving and make a handle. Well, eventually, my dad went and bought. I was with him. He was at the hardware store in Cleveland. And he went in and he bought getting some nails and staples. And he was looking at this hammer, at the hammers and saws and stuff on the wall, and looking at them, and he kept looking at this hammer. And finally, I guess he figured he could afford it. He was going to get it. He bought that hammer. Now, I don't have that hammer anymore. I have no idea what happened to the hammer. It may have burned up in the old house when Kim's house burned. It may have got, my brother may have got it at some point. I don't know. Or it got lost. Who knows? My dad passed back in '85. Most of his old tools he'd given me, but I'm sure he wouldn't have given me that hammer. But he was always digging stuff out of his old tool room, his old shop out there, and he'd call me and say, "Hey son, I got something I'm gonna give you." And I'd go down and there'd be an old box of stuff in it. That's how I got the old axe head that belonged to his grandpa that they cut their kindling with. And I went and bought a handle for it. He wouldn't carve no handle. But stuff like that. And his old wire stretchers. And there's another story. I'm going to show you the wire stretchers here in a few minutes. At the end of this video, we're going to go over and look at the wire stretchers, and I'm going to tell you a quick story about it. But my dad went out, that hammer he bought was similar to this one, but back then it still had a wooden handle. You can see the difference in this hammer and this one. This is like 22-ounce hammer head, maybe a 20. This is a 16. All right. But it would have had a wooden handle. Now this has got a metal handle with a straight claw. But if you notice, it's a little serrated end on it. That gets a better grip on your nail or your staples. It don't slip as bad as a slick one will. And that's how my dad's hammer was. But you just kind of imagine it like this, but with a wooden handle, long handle. He said, "Why would you want a heavy hammer?" Well, every time you come down with a hammer, you're hitting that nail with this weight. It's not so much in your arm, it's this weight here. A smaller head or a lighter weight head, you got to put more into it with your arms. And you do it all day long, build up some muscles. Here's the story. My dad loved that hammer. That hammer lived in our house. It was like had a life of its own. You come in the house, that hammer would be laying on the table, on the bar, by the heater, getting warm. Getting warm, keeping it warm. I don't have no idea why that hammer was allowed to live in our house, but it was. My dad loved that hammer. It may have been in competition. My mom probably had a competition with that hammer. He loved that hammer. So one day, we'd had some flooding and the fence was washed down on the river, and my dad said, "Son, you help me pull some wire on that river." I was about 10, 12 years old. And you know, cows, they're strange. They can have all the food they want over here, and a fence is here. And there might be this junk over here. In their mind, it's greener over there. And they'll push through, crawl through, jump, whatever. Some cows jump, some cows crawl. And they're going to go there if they can. So you had to keep up a good fence. We had to keep up a good fence on that river because they'd cross that river and they could go for miles back in there. So we're down on the fence, and we had to park about 300 or 400 yards away from there with our old tractor and carry our tools that we needed: wire stretchers, some wire, and bucket of staples and his hammer, wire stretcher stuff. And we go off down there, hook the wire stretchers to the wire. He'd pull it, get it good and tight. He'd say, "Okay, son, put a staple behind that barb so the wire can't slip back through." You know, I'd take that old hammer, boy, and I'd I'd put a staple in it. And we'd done it for quite a ways and didn't have a lot of more to do. But we ended up on this old bluff bank, almost straight down. And the water was deep, fairly deep. And he pulled the stretch and I walk up to that, and I don't know how I did it. To this day, I don't know. My hand may have been wet, sweat or what, I don't know. But just as I brought to that hammer, bored that staple, that hammer went right out of my hand in the river. And my dad, he loved that hammer. He didn't get mad. I mean, I'm sure he was angry. I'm sure he was angry. But he never went off on me. He never went to screaming and hollering. I probably would have. Well, my kids would tell you, oh yeah, our dad would go scream and get crazy. That's just them, you know. I'm sure they're worse than I am. But he looked, he said, what happened? I said, Dad, it slipped out of my hand. So he gets a long pole and he's kind of fishing around in that water, and there's a hollow stump right underneath the water. You can see it, big old hollow stump. He said, oh Lord, it went down that stump. He said, we'll never find it. And he's fishing around in that stump, because that's where we both thought it went. And he said, okay, I'll go get another hammer. That's a tractor. And he walked off. And I felt horrible. I felt horrible. I had lost my dad's hammer, the hammer that lived in our house. What's going to take that hammer's place? You know, my mom would be happy. How many times she had to move it to sweep or wipe the counters down or put stuff on the table. I took that pole and I kept fishing around outside of the stump, because he'd already fished around the stump. And I hit something. I felt something on the end of that stick. And I pulled up and I looked, that water's over my head. It's 6 foot deep, 8 foot deep, something like that. I take off my clothes. It's wintertime. It's December, January, it's cold. I take off my clothes. I lower myself down that bluff bank where roots and limbs or whatever's on it, and touch that water with my feet. Oh Lord, oh Lordy. But I lowered myself down that water, down to where my feet finally touched the bottom. It was over my head. I'm kind of holding on to the bank. Water's not swift, and I'm feeling with my feet, and I touch it. I know it's the hammer. I know it. So I come up, I get a good gulp of air, and I go back down and I get that hammer. I come back up, hanging onto a root, and I toss it over my head up onto the bank. At least the hammer is safe. Now I might wash away, but the hammer is safe. I pull myself back up there, and I just had got back up, and I'm trying to wipe off the water because I'm freezing to death. I'm shriveled up. More ways than one. I am shriveled up. And don't laugh, Heidi, it ain't funny. Heidi snickers. But anyway, I'm trying to dry off my clothes. About the time, here come my dad back up to the woods. And he saw me, and he thought I was getting undressed. No, son, Well, I'd done been in there. And then he got up closer, he saw I was wet. And I said, I got your hammer, Dad. I was so proud, boy. My chest stuck out like this. He was angry. All right, back. He was angry. And I can see it to this day. And he didn't chew me out, but he fussed at me. How dangerous that was. That hammer wasn't worth it. But I knew he loved that hammer. All right, anyway, we finished our job. He kind of fussed off and on the whole time. Get a grip on that hammer, son. Get a grip. And now and then he'll bring it back up. Don't ever do something like that. He said, you could have drowned. He said, it's not worth that hammer. Don't do stuff like that. Don't ever do stuff like that. He said, if I wanted a hammer bad enough, I'd have went in the water and got it. And then he asked me, was it in that stump? No, Dad. If it hadn't been in that stump, it ain't coming out, because I wasn't going down in no doggone stump. But anyway, we finally got through and come home, and he told me, he said, you go take a hot bath and get some dry clothes. Because my clothes was kind of damp from, drying off with them. And I could hear him telling my mom what had happened. She was upset. Yeah. And he told her, he says, I've already got onto it. Anyway, I've already got onto him. It's all okay. He won't never do it again, stuff like that. I knew he was proud, I could tell from his voice. The hammer moved back in, back on the table, back on the bar, back by the heater. I don't know whatever happened to that old hammer. I'm sure it may have went with my dad when he went to heaven. It may have went with him. I'm going to show you the wire stretchers, and I'm going to tell you a quick story about it when I get over to show you. Concerns Lester. Yeah. All right. I love you guys. I'm going to take you over and show you that. Oh, yeah. For you folks that's worried about that little girl swinging behind me there, she don't mind me out here. I know some of you folks, oh, is that a ghost? Is that a ghost? Is that a ghost, Pawpaw? I don't know what it is. It'll swing by itself. Ain't bothered me none. Maybe if it was a little ghost, she may have liked the story. All right, we're going over to look at those wire stretchers. At one point, the little swing stopped swinging. There's really not no wind out here to speak of. She may have got bored. I will hear a story. Who knows? Let's go. Let's go to the other shop and look at that wire stretcher. Right, these are wire stretchers. You tie this off like put a chain or something around a tree and tie it. You got these pulleys, these ropes go through. This is my dad's old stretchers. These ropes go through these old pulleys. And this area in here, you hook it to your wire. And here's a rope you pull. And when you pull it, as you can see, it pulls. These ropes go back and forth through these pulleys a certain way. A little bit of pull here, a little bit, pulls a long ways down here on your wire. So they're called old wire stretchers, or just wire stretchers. And those belong to my dad. And I'll tell you the story about them. Once Lester was a little boy and they were playing cowboys and Indians, he cut the rope out of these things. Yeah, he needed a rope. Oh, was I angry, folks. I was angry. I had to try to figure out how to rewound that rope through there, because it goes around and around and around, and it kind of loops to one side to the other, and one has to tie off right here, and the other end, they just keep going, and they come out over here. Ooh. No, he'll probably say I beat him, but I didn't. But I guarantee you, I bet I fussed at him. He's probably still angry. He's probably still angry about it. Yeah, cut the rope out of my dad's wire stretchers. That's the end of this story. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's called The Hammer. Y'all take care. No more laughing at Pawpaw, Heidi. No more laughing.